Hi everybody, this morning I'm going to talk to you about some multiple choice strategies that hopefully when you approach these release item quizzes, it will help you with or the release item practice for the AP test. As you know, that's going to be about half of your total score on your AP test, so 45% of the score comes from the multiple choice section. And if your average essay score is a 5, which means it's adequate, you're going to need to get at least half of those multiple choice questions correct to get a passing score on the test. So on this paper, you're going to be filling in blanks as I go over, and I'm not going to discuss every single thing that's on the paper because obviously you're literate, you can read, but I will try to elaborate on anything that I feel like needs a little bit more explanation. I was going to videotape this by having the camera down and make it a little bit less shaky, but check it out. I have a little helper this morning. So anyway, things that you can do before the test to help you be successful. Practice, 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 because this is a skills-based exam. It's not a knowledge-based thing. So it's not a bunch of facts you have to memorize. It's things you need to practice. You need to be able to write these certain types of essays. You need to be able to put together a coherent argument. You need to be able to analyze rhetorical strategies. So that's why we're practicing all these things. And you have to be comfortable with doing a standardized test in a timed format. So you have to be comfortable with these multiple choice things. That's why if you are doing the after school program with me over the next couple of months, I can guarantee you we are going to be doing several of these practice passages to help you be more comfortable with them. The second tip that you can use before the test, you need to know your stuff. You really need to take the time to learn those very basic rhetorical strategies that you took notes over a couple weeks ago. There are also some more. So on the handout today, there are a couple more that you can add that are very commonly referenced, just common vocabulary that you can get to know. So learn those rhetorical strategies. The third thing that you can do, and I touched on this last week, read as much as you can, as often as you can. A lot of the test questions for multiple choice rely on you having a good vocabulary. So if you know what the word means, you're going to be able to answer the question correctly. If you don't, you'll be very confused as to what they're even asking. So reading helps you with vocabulary in addition to just making you a more interesting and educated person. All right, so that takes us to things that you can do during the test. I need you, Whitty, to get off of the table. I call him Whitty. His name is Whitman, like Walt Whitman, but we normally call him Whit or Whitster or Whitty. So let's get you off the table. Okay, here you go. Go play with your brother, friends. All right, so the first step you can do during the test is to pace yourself. If there are 4 passages on this hour-long test, that means for you math buffs out there, you've got about 15 minutes per passage. Give or take a little. Don't spend more than 20 minutes on a passage. You will wind up running out of time. The second step is to get inside the author's head. Often, they will give you a little bit of information about the time period the author wrote in, the subject that he's addressing, any historical context that you need. And, oh, I said the magic word. So you need to pay attention to anything they tell you about the context at the beginning of the piece. Sometimes they don't tell you anything, but like I said, most of the time they do. It's in italics at the top of the passage. Third step. This is something that I don't know, like advanced readers do naturally, is they try to hear the words as they read them. So these passages are often very dense passages, hard to process, but if you pretend like you can hear like an actor reading the passage, somebody that you like, maybe a good one is Morgan Freeman. He has such a great voice. So try to imagine Morgan Freeman's voice reading the passage out loud. This can help you with phrasing. It can help you kind of process the humanity or the message a little bit better, because it's not just a bunch of words like in a textbook that you're getting lost in. You're actually hearing what the speaker is trying to say, because you're kind of acting it out in your head. It's surprisingly helpful. If you've never tried it before, you might want to. The fourth thing that you can do during the test or during a practice passage is to, of course, be an active reader. So that means you're marking the passage as you go, you're labeling things, just keeping your mind engaged as you read. Okay. The other thing that's written on this tip right here is that if you label, that can also help you like reference, go back to where you have noticed like, oh, he uses simile here, he uses simile here, he uses simile here. Like in this Faulkner passage, turns out later on, there's a question about what's one of the strategies that he uses most often. And so if you had been labeling, you could glance back and see the answer, even without looking at the options that they're giving you. That actually leads us into the fifth tip here for during the test, and that's what is called the anticipation method. So when you practice the anticipation method, that means you read the question stem, the part of the question that asks something before the multiple choice options. And so you read the stem and then you kind of stop for a second and you think, okay, how would I answer that if it was a fill in the blank? How would I answer that if I didn't have any options? And so if you just kind of guess before you look at the options, sometimes you'll get down to A, B, C, D, or E, and it will be almost exactly what you thought in your head. And when that happens, that's almost always the right answer, because sometimes you know things in your brain and you don't have to rely on them. The problem with multiple choice in AP is that all of the answers are designed to seem like they could be correct. They're trying to trick you. So if you can come up with the answer before you look at the options, then that can help you kind of ignore the stuff that's meant to confuse you. All right, so flip on over to the back of the page. We're going to the sixth tip. Use line references. Obviously, if it says, you know, in line 15, Faulkner used this strategy, whatever. So look back at the line, duh, but also look at the surrounding lines, because almost always you can't just look at that one line isolated and get the right answer. You need to know what came before and what comes directly after to get the full picture of what that line really does. So read the surrounding lines when it references a line number. Tip number 7, use the process of elimination. So it seems obvious, of course you would do that, right? But maybe not. So when you read something and you know, oh, he never even used personification, I know it can't be that, cross it out on your paper, because then that takes you from guessing correctly at 20% chance to now it's a 25% chance of guessing correctly. If you can eliminate only one, that's helping you possibly win. Having a meltdown here. We're almost finished, so I'm going to power through. Step 8 is to don't skip questions. I covered this the first day that I met you. If you skip a question, there's no way you're going to get it right. Hold on. Come here. I gotcha. I gotcha. I know you're sad. So if you skip the questions, look at that, you know you're not going to get it right. If you guess blindly, you might, and they don't penalize you for answering it incorrectly. So you need to try to answer every single question. Okay, the next thing is to answer all the questions for each passage before you move on to the next passage, because if you don't, you're going to have to reread a passage after you've read 2 or 3 more, and that gets really confusing. So always, when you're pacing yourself and you've got about 20 minutes per passage, or actually 15, so you don't have any more than 20 minutes per passage. Knowing that, by the time that you get to that 15-minute mark, you better, or really 10, you better be answering those questions. And you realize, okay, I've used 20 minutes on this passage, I need to move on. So that's where you pick one, what I call it the lucky letter. So pick it right now. It can be A, B, C, D, or E. And so you can say, hey, I am going to go with A because I'm an A student. And so A is always your guessing letter. If you choose one letter and use it every single time you're going to guess, you have a much more likely chance of getting some questions right than if you're randomly guessing. If you randomly guess, you could get every single one of those questions wrong. But if you pick A for every single one that you're guessing on, in all likelihood, some of those answers are going to be A. So that's a really good strategy that you can use. Again, trying to answer all the questions that you need to answer per passage before you move to the next one. And then that will help you avoid having to reread that passage. You don't have the time to reread. All right.